Hey guys, Sean here. I am back with this project and I want to show you my mastering chain. So in the last project I showed you how to build this. This is basically my essential structure template for creating a track in Ableton. You can see that there is a mix bus, there's a master bus, and then there's these instrument groups. And within those, there are MIDI tracks for VSTs. And I have not applied any VSTs to this project yet. I've actually kept it just completely clean and been trying to make sure that there's nothing on here that is excessive or unnecessary at the moment. So one place I will start before moving on to the mix and the master is that if you were following in the last video, I added this return bus here for my sends. And before I go any further, I just want to throw a limiter on that. It's, you could probably get away without having one. But I think having a good practice of using limiters and also the utility plugin can really help with leveling and imaging later on down the road. So where is it? There it is. Just going to apply the limiter. Going to hit, I'm going to leave it at about 300. That's totally fine. I'm going to leave all the other settings. I don't even think that it's going to trigger it, but I just like throwing it on there just in case. Okay, so moving on beyond that. What I'm going to talk about in this video is my mastering chain and my mixing chain. The next video I'll do will be my sends effects, including parallel compression and reverbs. So to start with my mastering chain, I have it, a number of chains saved here in my user library, and I really like this user library feature. If you're just starting out in Ableton, you might be looking for somewhere where you can save plugin settings and instruments and track settings. And it's a little bit confusing at first because there's nothing up here in the toolbar. What you're looking for is down here in the user library. And the way to do that is like I did here with my sidechain trigger. So I have this instrument track over here. All I have to do is drag it right over here to the user library, and it would come up just like that as sine waveforms. So I had already done that, sine waveforms right here, and I renamed it floor to floor and made a folder and called it triggers. So this is super helpful. You can see I have bus settings for different buses in here. So I would apply these further on down in the mix or the mix process to these instrument groups here. I'm not going to go over those yet, but we will further down the road. I also have my master chain, my mix chain, and my returns, and then a few other things in here. So really helpful to just build these as you go. These are all different iterations of the same mastering chain. There are different plugins in various places as I'm going along and developing this mastering chain. So this is the latest iteration, and I'll go over these for you. But as you can see here, there's a wrapper around all these, and this wrapper essentially is that mastering chain. So if I hit ungroup, you can see they're not connected anymore, but in order to save them, I would want them to be grouped. So what you would do is you would group them. So select them all, right click on them. That puts that wrapper around them again. And then you can just drag that wrapper over here to your user library. And so that's how you save a plugin chain. And that'll save the settings in it and everything. So super handy, super useful. So this is my mastering chain. And I start with an EQ8. And as you can see, I have it set up in mid-side mode. So that gives me different bands, stereo bands, basically, to work with. So a center band and then, or a side band and a mid band. And so, or I believe, the side band would be uh, the outer parts of it. So what you do for the mid-side equalizer here is on the sidebands you cut at 100 hertz to avoid low-end phase distortion, and then cut at 22 kilohertz. And on the mid, it's 20 hertz and 22 kilohertz. I also like to put a little bit of a dip sometimes here around 500 hertz on both the mid and the side, and possibly even just a little bit of a slight bump at 5 kilohertz. Next up is going to be a compressor that is designed to catch the peaks. So if I have a signal that is has some slight spikes, this can draw those in, and so it has a very fast speed. I do set the side chain so that it's not applying to the low end, so at about 100 hertz, just a little bit above sometimes. And then the peak reduction is basically based on where the meter is. So once that meter just starts to spike a little, I'll stop adjusting it higher, and then I'll try to find a place where the meter really doesn't move at all, but it's set just below so that if there is a spike, it'll catch it. And then you can dial in the mix here as well. This might also be a good place in the mastering chain to just add a little bit of decibel gain, or a few decibels of gain without adding color or distortion. Next up is multiband compression, and this is Ableton stock. I should back up. I'm not sure if I said this, the name of the last one, but it's BX Opto from Brainworks by Plugin Alliance. And yeah, next up, multiband compression from Ableton stock. This one gives some great abilities to manipulate the sound because you can alter the compression of 3 separate bands. You select those bands over here with the frequency splits. You've got soft knee and RMS or peak selection here. So soft knee or hard knee, RMS or peak. And these are both gentler, so these are generally recommended more in mastering. We've got essentially a ratio, compression ratio here at the visualization of it instead of numbers. And usually I like to have the mids squashed a little bit more and then the highs, and then leave the bass slightly more open. Attack and release times are really essential, especially for electronic and dance music. You really want to have those dialed in. And you can find recommendations. I mean, these are fairly ballpark, so you can start with these. There's plenty of other tutorials online that will have them as well. And then you've got output gain, and then you can dial in the amount here or the time. All right. Mag 4. I really love this one. This one's fun. This air gain feature allows you to turn up the higher bands of frequencies without causing them to distort. It really allows for more sensitivity and liveliness in those bands. As you can see, this says it's 40 kilohertz, so that's even above human hearing. But I really think it's a great place to start with when opening up a palette for writing, because it just gives energy to all those higher frequencies, so you can write and be clear and have an idea in there and not think, not waste a ton of time in trying to find the sound or sculpt it. It's I feel like it's there more quickly because it's giving you more to work with up in those higher frequencies. So I find I have to do less sound design when I have that already as the base of the palette. So that is the Mag 4, and then it's a fairly limited equalizer, but it's great for shaping the sound. I don't do extreme um, gain on any of these, but sometimes on this, maybe around the 650, 650 hertz, I'll do um, 2 decibels of a cut here. Otherwise, yeah, it's a very gentle EQ. Um, yeah, a great device there. And for mastering, I think where I'm at right now, I definitely don't want to be taking out, uh, surgical cuts and things like that. So this is more of a gentle blending tool that I find very useful. And that was also from Plugin Alliance, the Mag 4. This next one is from Universal Audio. It's one of their native plugins. They also have a Mag 4 as a part of their VST, UAD VSTs, or UAD plugins, but I believe it's only available on with one of their Apollo devices. They've recently opened up their plugins to native, so you can run it without one of their uh, interfaces, or yeah, and I really love their stuff. I had their interfaces for a while, but I don't believe they're currently in 24-bit or offer 24-bit. So when I was shopping for a new one, actually I had also downgraded my computer, so I couldn't use the Thunderbolt Apollo I had. So I had to look for a USB interface, and I found the SSL12. And I'm super thrilled that I still get to use some of the UAD plugins, especially this Fairchild 670. This is a very famous compressor. I think it's probably most utilized in rock and heavier genres. It colors the sound a lot, as you can see over here, or it can color the sound a lot, however, depending on how you dial it in. As you can see over here in the spectrum, there's about negative 160 decibels. Well, it's reading at negative 160 here, so there's some hum or something, and that is coming from this Fairchild. So if I turn it off, that goes away. So it just has a little bit of color. I really like it. I think it has a bit of a metallic and like a strength to it. It does have a bit of a rock edge, which I like with drum machines and synthesizers. And how I use it, again, it has the side chain over here, so I dial out the lower frequencies. I don't really want to squash those. Like, I want those to come through clean. I usually leave the output right in the middle. I don't really want to be pushing the gain here, or else I might color or distort the sound. And then I leave the mix at about 60%. I'll set the knee over here to about 9 o'clock, and then I'll check to see where the meter is hitting, and I'll adjust the threshold according to that, and then I'll come over here and dial in the gain, the knee a little bit more to where the kick really sounds like it's starting to separate and create its own space and its own distinction from the rest of the track. And right at that moment, I'll leave it where that is, and then I'll come over here to the threshold to where it just is barely moving. And then that's where I like it. And I always leave the input gain up on this for mastering. I don't want to be affecting the gain here, either on the input or the output. I really want this, all of the sound to come from where I'm dialing in both the knee and the threshold. And then I leave the time constant all the way open so that the decay isn't really affecting the sound of the track as much. it's just giving it a nice even boost and crisp and clearness. All right, cool. So that's the Fairchild 670. The last real coloring um, effect here I have is the Teletronics LA2A leveling amplifier, also from Universal Audio. And I picked this concept up just from reading some forum posts about people's mastering chains and their fun tricks. And I turned the peak reduction all the way down on this one. So that's sort of the idea here, is we don't want this to actually um, compress the sound, compress the tone. It is a compressor, a limiter, but it naturally just has a color to it as well, similar to the Fairchild. And both these are very classic. They fit very well with rock, and I also really like to use them with electronic music. So leave the gain usually between 20 and 30. Those are kind of my 20 is my lower end, 30 is my upper end, and that's really just kind of depending on where the signal is hitting here. So if I need to bring it up closer to -0.3, I'll add some gain. If I need to bring it a little bit further down so it's not so squashed, I'll bring it back down to 20, and that gives me a pretty great range where the sound is clear, it's warm, and it's not overly squashed. Um, yeah. I also like to play around with the high filter here a little bit. I think that also can really help the color, can help you avoid too much effect and it becoming too noticeable. And that's really one of the main things about when you're applying effects is you kind of want to find that breakup point, that edge where it's noticeable, and then just dial it back one. And then you'll find it's this beautiful space where the effect works, but you don't really notice it working. And then things really begin to mesh, and I think that's where the magic happens. So find where your ear first notices it, and then dial it back one. So that's my Zen moment there for VSTs. Kind of Spinal Tap moment, I feel like. This one goes to 12, but dial it back. All right. Next up, and really last, is the limiter. So pretty standard, -0.3. That's always going to be your peak in music. For mastering, you never want to go above that. So you want to set a limiter at that. And I've pointed out a few other places that I like to affect the gain, and it's usually in points where I find it to be very clean and transparent. You can do it here. I would probably prefer usually to do it, like I said, either on the LA2A or on the BX Opto. And this is sort of the last option, and I don't find I ever move this away from 0 decibels of gain, but I do find that I sometimes do get a little bit of a effect here where it does catch it, and you can see a little bit of yellow there. You don't really want it coming down to -6. You've got some issues in your either mix or master if it's that hot. But if it's just showing a little bit yellow there, then you're probably dialed into just the right spot. And then I also set the release just a little bit longer than a 300, just to keep it nice and open, but not so that it's running into itself. And then finally, just some leveling, some metering, and spectral imaging stuff. So you got the spectrum, and then levels for mastering the mix. A lot of fun things to look at. I really enjoy having the stereo field. These are kind of fun to just evaluate. The LRA measures dynamic range over time, so if you're not making it interesting, if it's just one static drone, then your LRA is going to be really low. But if it's, loud, then soft, and then loud, then soft. The LRA is going to be a higher number, and I guess it's generally recommended that you should try to at least have some sort of dynamics in there because the human brain enjoys that. Yeah, so levels is a fun one to use. I also really liked the SSL meter when I had the opportunity to use it, so I will probably look into that soon. Okay, so that's my mastering chain. Let me know if you have any questions down below. The reason I use that is because I don't want to have to send my projects to a mastering studio. I want to do this in-house, and I think this is effective. There are certainly many other VSTs that you can use. You can even do this all with Ableton stock VSTs, and you can find tutorials for that online. And yeah, I think it's important to keep it simple, but also to be purposeful in these plugins and not just throw things on here willy-nilly. I think that's what I did when I first started off, and yeah, this does not kill my CPU. But if I were, if I were to have tried to do this without following a tutorial at first, I don't think I would have achieved any result close to what I've been getting. So yeah, that is my mastering chain. Next up, I will show you my mix bus. And my mix bus is a lot simpler. I only use 3 plugins on it. So the first plugin I use is the Universal Audio API 2500 bus compressor. And I usually have that set to the mix bus, to mix glue, either mix glue 1 or 2, with the mix dialed into about 55 or 60% there. The makeup gain all the way down. I try not to use that. I like to solve my problems in the mix instead of using makeup gain. So if my mix is too low, I'll go back and I'll raise all my tracks. And I find that I just am able to make it work better than having to dial in that. I feel like at the end of the day, it means I was being lazy. Tell me I'm wrong. I would love to know if you use makeup gain and why. And then over here, these are really fun, these tone tools. So let's show you how I use that sidechain compressor real quick. So here's where I would turn that on. And so sync it there, turn it on right here. I hit play. You can see now it's triggering from this track over here of the sine waveforms that I showed in the last video, and that's my sidechain trigger. So I usually like it on the mix bus to be under 2 right there, so only kind of moving about 1 notch, and you would adjust that here on the threshold. One thing to keep in mind though is that if you change these, that will also affect the way that that meter will move. And I kind of like these settings here. So a soft knee, a normal thrust. So if I had it loud, I would have to actually turn the threshold up. That might be useful in genres where you really want it to pump and you want the whole track to really feel like it's moving. I like more subtle movements in the sound, and so I'm going to keep it at normal, so I don't have to have a big ratio or threshold on there, or a high threshold. And then the tone type, actually I found this old to be kind of nice. It has a little bit more softness or smear to it, whereas the new tone type on this API 2500 is a bit more edgy. Great for modern sounds, but since I'm going to be using some VSTs that replicate old Roland's drum machines and synthesizers, we'll keep it with the old for now. And then over here, I showed you, I dial in the threshold here, and I base that on the meter here. And then like to keep an open attack. You don't want to really affect any transients, so keeping it at um, 3 uh, 3 seconds, yeah, 3 milliseconds, is very helpful. The ratio very low. You don't really want to squash the mix. And then this is helpful too. This release variable can give a very natural feel to the compression with a high, long release as well, to not really feel like the compression's cutting out, and then changing the release or setting a release variable so that it's not always exactly the same, can really give a natural and organic feel to it. And then as well, similarly, the link is how linked the left and the right side are. So this is one set to about 70%, so they can operate somewhat independently, which also helps things to sound fairly organic. So that is the UAD API 2500. It's a really great sounding bus compressor, and I will use that also sometimes lower down in the mix too. I will often put it on these instrument groups if I'm going to be doing subgroups as well within that. I might even create a drum group and then put the API on that. Those are things that, every project is different, and sometimes it helps to have it, sometimes it doesn't. But for minimum, I would say what I have here is pretty essential. So next up is the Pultec. So Pultec EQP1A, also from Universal Audio, and this is somewhat similar to the Mag in that it's not like a precision EQ, but it is extremely musical and also very classical. You'll see this in most professional studios, particularly from the 60s, 70s, 80s, in the days of analog. So let's see. We start with our frequency selection. So as you see, there's not all that many. It's just a choice of two bands, 20, 30, 60, or 100 for hertz for the first band, or 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12, or 16 kilohertz for the high frequency EQ band. And then you can dial in the bandwidth here. So I usually like to keep it under 5. Kind of gives it a little bit more precision to it, and also helps avoid, I think, boosting unwanted frequencies. And then for the mix, I'll usually keep it at 110, just so that I'm usually emphasizing those a little bit, and I'll usually give them a bit of a boost. That's probably more than I would use it for the mix. I'll probably keep it around just 1. And then the attenuation, I'll dial in as necessary. Attenuation is great because it can shave off the sound without destroying it, so that you can really make sounds sit really well in the mix, or make mixes sit really well. You can also dial in the level of the attenuation here, either 5, 10, or 20. And then lastly, you've got gain here, and I don't really use that very often. And this just turns the effect on or off. All right, so that's the Pultec EQP1A from Universal Audio. And then lastly, I've got another Universal Audio. So my whole mix bus is U Audio, and this is just a tape effect. So it gives a little bit of warmth, a little bit of natural smear to the sound, and space. It does provide, in my opinion, a little bit of more clarity to the imaging. So I really don't change any of the settings, and I even just leave it at input and output. As long as that meter is moving a little bit, then I'm happy. It means that it's making some sound. it's affecting the sound. Yeah, and I try to keep the settings just like this where they are stock. So before we go further, why don't I just show you what this sounds like? I'm going to put that on here so that we can hear the effect of the mastering, and I'll just turn that on and off. So you see there's a little bit more space, a little more openness just from the mixing bus, not a whole lot. And then the mastering bus, it really livens it up a lot. Okay, cool. So that's my mixing bus and that's my mastering bus. And you can see why I use them. I mean, I think even just from that, quick drum loop, night and day difference. And it makes writing a lot of fun. And this doesn't really eat up a lot of CPU. I can write with it on my fairly old Mac. So I feel like when you have things properly arranged, you're sending things to the right buses, and you're not placing effects on either the VST tracks themselves or your master track. That CPU can really go a lot further. So I hope you guys got something out of this today. Let me know if you have any questions. If you feel like you want to get in touch, you can go over to my SoundCloud, send me a message, give me a like or a follow. Also, there's a little tip jar over here. Feel free to support. I'll be uploading more music to my SoundCloud soon, and I'll have some new videos out. I'm also next up is going to be my sends and return channels, and then I'll probably do some videos on my buses, my instrument buses. So thanks, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you got something out of it. Cheers. Sean, Shanto, Shinobi.